So I've done a lot of videos about what new generation card you should get and the benefit of the Team Green and Team Red cards, and there are definitely a ton of good reasons to buy either. But at this point, you're probably in one of two camps. You're either saying, Kaido, you dumbass, why would you buy a 970 when there's all this shiny new chrome out on the market? Or you're screaming incoherently about 3.5 gigs of VRAM. Either way, there's one easy answer. Price. That's right, before this card I had a Gigabyte Windforce 770 that I got for 120 Canadian buckaroos, which was all I could afford at the time, and I managed to snag this Asus Strix 970 for 240 Canadian dollar dues. For those of you who don't understand why things cost so much in Canada, neither do I, trust me. That's the equivalent of around 180 freedom bucks. Now you might ask, what's the point of having a GTX 970, which is a pretty baller card still in my opinion, if you're pairing it with an i7 920 that came out in 2008? Well, running Heaven on a loop for 2 to 3 hours, the CPU utilization never went above 35%. I should mention it's clocked at 3.7 GHz and the stock clock is at 2.66, so it's overclocked pretty heavily, but that's still pretty low for a 920. And running Firestrike didn't push the CPU higher than 30% either, even though the 970 is overclocked to 1489 MHz on the core and 7700 MHz on the memory. That got me thinking, could I match the FPS that the 970 got when it was first reviewed with way more expensive CPUs? So running a test bench of an i7 920 at 3.7 GHz, 10 gigs of DDR3, an Asus Maximus 5 Gene motherboard, and 120 gig SSD, which I don't know the company that made it, the shorter answer is yes. The only game that's in my library now that Anandtech tested back in September of 2014 is Crysis 3. So I ran the benchmark at the same settings they used in the most demanding part of the game I could find, the Liberty Dome area with all that grass and the waving aliens and all that stuff. I ended up getting an average of 107 FPS with a minimum of 62. For comparison, the stock 970 got an 88 FPS average, but Anandtech doesn't put out minimums. This just shows how good Maxwell is at overclocking, with an 18% overclock leading to around a 20% increase in performance. Even Pascal doesn't overclock this well. So I took it one step further. Anandtech also used Crysis 3 in their 1060 review, so could I match the 1060's performance? Again, yes. At very high settings with FXAA, the same settings they used, I got an average of 75 FPS with a minimum at 54, compared to the stock 1060's average of 70 FPS. This makes sense. Keep in mind the 1060 has more VRAM, but in terms of raw performance, you weren't going to get a 1060 if you had a 970 anyway. That's not really an upgrade, it's more of a side grade. Running Firestrike got a graphics score of 12,668 with an overall system score of 10,010. This is pretty low considering an average RX 480 gets up into the mid 13,000s and overclocked can go up to 15,000 like Jace2Sen showed in his video. Moving on to Overwatch, which I ran at all epic settings with everything cranked up and got an average of 108 FPS and a minimum of 91. So if you're only playing multiplayer games and you want to get a high refresh rate monitor, no worries, 970 will do you good. Last but not least, I ran Rise of the Tomb Raider just to see how far the VRAM could get us if we were trying to match the 1060's performance. Again, this is compared straight to the Anandtech review, and running it with the same settings they used with very high settings, FXAA and pure hair turned off, I got an average of 76 FPS, but the real story here is in the minimums, which came in at 25 FPS. Now Rise of the Tomb Raider warns you that you need a card with more than 4 gigs of VRAM to run very high settings, and the VRAM on the 970 was maxed out at 4 gigs the whole time, so we get these really bad minimum frame rates. What does this mean? It means that if you're looking to play things on ultra settings for the foreseeable future, pony up for something a little more up the ladder. The 1070 will probably do you good. It has 8 gigs of VRAM and it can pretty much demolish anything at 1080 and 1440p. But if you're on a budget like I was and need a card that can knock out pretty much anything at 1080p with a few settings turned down, then keep in mind that you can get a secondhand 970 on a place like Hard Forum for around $160, and realistically I don't see the resale value going below $150 anytime soon. These cards are just too good to get really cheap that fast. Now when the 1050 Ti comes out, we'll see how that affects it, but I don't think that's going to affect the 970's resale value at all, since the 1050 Ti and the 1050 are way slower cards. Okay, now for some downsides. Is it the fastest thing in the world? No, it's not. Is it going to melt your brain with how much FPS it puts out? It probably won't. Could it reheat your pizza? Probably not, but it can run pretty much whatever you want at high to ultra settings at 60 FPS at 1080p. Will it do that for the foreseeable future? And by foreseeable future I mean the next 2 to 3 years. No, probably not. Nvidia's support for their older GPUs isn't amazing, but Maxwell is still fresh enough in the pan that it's got years to go before I think it'll become a problem. All that aside, I will say this. If you're a first-time PC builder and you're looking for a graphics card to buy, don't go the route I did. If you're the type of person who needs their shiny new computer to boot on the first try, don't do this. It's probably going to take some finagling, and if you don't think you can finagle all that well, go get yourself a new card and a new CPU. No one will know the difference. Now one thing you might all be thinking is, where's the DX12? I didn't just leave the DX12 games out because I'm an Nvidia shill. I'm actually waiting for some more DX12 games to come out so that I can take a more comprehensive look at DX12 and how it works on Maxwell and Pascal, so get subscribed for that video. Anyway, thanks for watching guys. If you liked this video, give it a like, leave a comment telling me how dumb I am to not get whatever graphics card you got, or something about 3.5 gigs VRAM, and get subscribed for the $400 gaming PC build based on my computer. Anyway, I'm Kaido from Regicide Gaming, and I'll see you in the next video.